This video is your introduction to the Spectra Products Brake Inspector System, an electronic in-cab air brake diagnostic system. Brake Inspector will eliminate the #1 maintenance problem facing fleets today. In the trucking and transportation industry, the #1 road safety issue is brake defects, specifically out-of-adjustment brakes. Did you know that 68% of out-of-service violations are brake-related defects? 54% of brake defects are out-of-adjustment brakes. 67% of these brake defects occurred on vehicles with automatic slack adjusters. Automatic slack adjusters give drivers and mechanics a false sense of security, but statistics speak for themselves. In addition to showing brakes that are in adjustment, Brake Inspector identifies foundation brake problems including non-activating brake chambers, slow-activating brake chambers, non-releasing brakes, slow-releasing brakes, brakes approaching the adjustment limit, brakes reached or past the adjustment limit, and weak or broken parking brake springs. Brake Inspector has a positive impact on your maintenance costs with fewer unnecessary brake adjustments. Using Brake Inspector will preempt costly repairs by identifying existing and potential brake problems. Using Brake Inspector, you can balance brake adjustment at each wheel end and extend tire life. Productivity will increase because your drivers will be spending less time on pre-trip brake inspection. There will be less downtime from roadside detention due to out-of-service infractions. Your mechanics will spend less time locating and diagnosing brake faults. Equipment is on the road quicker with less downtime in the shop. In this presentation, we will show you that Brake Inspector is a valuable tool that will pay for itself in lower maintenance and operating expenses. Depending on your fleet's operating costs and maintenance procedures, Brake Inspector can pay for itself in less than 12 months, and it can enhance the reputation of your fleet and your commitment to safety in the eyes of regulatory agencies and the public at large. Brake Inspector can improve your safety record by helping to eliminate brake-related roadside infractions and resulting fines. This means no brake-related demerit points. Brake Inspector will increase driver confidence in the safety of the vehicle. You will demonstrate to regulatory and inspection agencies that you are committed to safety, and you gain the public relations benefit of operating a safe fleet. Let's take a closer look at the Brake Inspector Air Brake Diagnostic System. The in-cab module displays up to 4 axles with LEDs at each wheel end, representing a specific brake chamber. The chambers are identified by axle and by left side and right side orientation. The tricolor LEDs emit green, yellow, or red signals indicating the type of brake default and the wheel end location. A row of 4 LEDs at the top of the display module permits review of the brake stroke status after each brake application. 2 cables exit the back of the display, allowing the gauge to interface with the sensors located at each wheel end position. The entire display module is encased in an impact-resistant housing that is sealed with a weatherproof epoxy compound. The sensor contains an automotive-grade microprocessor and Hall effect switches activated by pushrod movement when air brakes are applied. Electronic components are encased in a durable, impact-resistant Styron enclosure that is sealed with epoxy for complete weatherproofing. The sensor is not affected by temperature or altitude, performing in the most severe environments. A high-impact Styron housing is used to secure the sensor, which snaps into the housing. A zinc-plated heavy-duty steel bracket is provided to mount the sensor housing to the brake chamber. The main bracket attaches the sensor assembly to the brake chamber. The companion to the sensor is a magnetic clevis pin that replaces the existing clevis pin. A powerful neodymium magnet at the end of the clevis pin is positioned up to a 1/4 inch from the sensor face and activates the sensor as brakes are applied and released. A durable red plastic cover provides easy visibility of the magnetic clevis pin and helps with sensor alignment. The Brake Inspector kit includes a junction unit called a crossover that provides 3 or 4 connection points. Crossovers are made from durable, impact-resistant Styron and contain a circuit board that is sealed with epoxy for complete weatherproofing. A cable extension with male connectors on each end is used to link sensors, crossovers, and the display module, forming a daisy-chained harness. The cable extensions have super seal connectors that are waterproof when mated with the crossover or sensor. They also have a heat-resistant nylon loom for additional protection. Extensions of various lengths are used to connect the system. Let's look at how the brake inspector system operates. When the ignition is turned on, the wheel end LEDs will illuminate simultaneously in red, yellow, and green, followed by the stroke LEDs at the top of the display. The system is showing that all LEDs are in working order and the brake inspector system is activated. When the foot pedal is depressed, these LEDs will indicate the brake fault status at each wheel end position. During the ignition startup sequence, the brake inspector system automatically enters into driver mode. When the brakes are applied, only fault conditions are shown on the display gauge. In the event there are no faults, the LEDs will not illuminate. A second mode, called Maintenance Mode, can be activated to show LED illuminations for both brake fault and no fault conditions. The Mode button on the display module is pressed once to move from Driver Mode to Maintenance Mode. You can now see all conditions. A no fault condition is shown with a green LED at the wheel end. The system will remain in Maintenance Mode until the Mode button is pressed again to re-enter Driver Mode or the ignition is turned off. When the ignition is again turned on, the brake inspector will automatically be in driver mode. Brake inspector will show brake performance with LEDs representing each brake chamber at a specific wheel end position. The tricolor LEDs emit green, yellow, or red signals indicating the type of brake fault and the wheel end location. When the air brakes are applied, the push rod moves the magnetic clevis pin across the face of the sensor, and the display module LEDs are illuminated. A status LED at each wheel end will light solid green, indicating that brakes are in proper adjustment. As the brake adjustment point is approached, a solid yellow LED will light up. When the limit is reached or exceeded, a solid red LED will alert the driver that brakes need to be adjusted. If the brake fails to activate, a flashing red LED will indicate this problem. When the user releases the air brakes, the LEDs will automatically extinguish if no faults are indicated. If a solid green, yellow, or red LED remains on after the brakes are released, the push rod at the wheel end where the LED is still illuminated has not retracted. This indicates a dangerous hung brake condition. The display module LEDs will show brake fault conditions for 15 seconds and then extinguish to avoid distracting the driver of the vehicle. When the parking brake is applied, brake inspector will indicate if the parking brake spring is operating properly or if there is a weak or broken spring. Because there are no parking brakes on the steer axle wheel end, LEDs will begin flashing red. This occurs because the system detects no push rod movement. The remaining rear axle wheel ends will illuminate green if the springs are in good condition. If a chamber has a weak or broken parking brake spring, the wheel end with a defect will flash red. Brake inspector has the ability to indicate if a system malfunction occurs. When the brakes are applied, a flashing green LED indicates the sensor and clevis pins are not aligned. Realignment must be completed for proper performance monitoring. Similarly, if a sensor ceases to operate, a flashing yellow LED will occur at the affected wheel end. A new sensor is required for proper performance monitoring. Brake inspector stores the last brake application before the ignition is turned off. The last brake application will be displayed when the brake inspector system is in driver mode or maintenance mode. While the system is operating, push the toggle button once to review the last brake application. Note that all wheel end LEDs will light up indicating the stroke status and fault status. Press the toggle button again and the front left wheel end LED labeled 1L will illuminate. The brake stroke adjustment LEDs at the top of the display module will show the brake stroke adjustment status of yellow for the front left wheel end. By pressing the toggle button again, you will see the last brake application results at the next wheel end position. Let's turn our attention to how the system is installed. Brake inspector installs easily with normal shop equipment. This diagram shows a typical 3-axle installation. At each wheel end, a brake inspector magnetic clevis pin replaces the existing clevis pin. A sensor is mounted on each brake chamber and positioned to align with the clevis pin. The sensor assembly at each wheel end is connected using a cable extension to a junction called a crossover. These are positioned over each axle. Each crossover is connected in a daisy chain from the rear axle to the front axle until all axles are linked together. The display module is attached to the dash of the vehicle using a Velcro pad or self-tapping screws. The display module cable is fed through the dash and connects through the firewall to the steer axle crossover. Finally, the display module and sensors are programmed to identify wheel end location on the display module and brake adjustment limits based on brake chamber type. As we stated earlier, Brake Inspector will have a positive impact on maintenance costs. Let's consider unnecessary brake adjustments. Many drivers today do not or cannot identify out-of-adjustment brakes. During a pre-trip inspection, they will not complete the time-consuming procedure of chalking and measuring pushrod travel. It is easier to tell maintenance that the brakes need adjustment. This means both driver and equipment downtime as a mechanic inspects the brakes. The result is hundreds of hours annually of unnecessary mechanic labor combined with the same lost hours of driver and equipment productivity. What is the cost to your fleet? Let's take a look at a typical well-run fleet using our savings calculator. Let's assume we have internal operating costs of $50 per hour for a mechanic, $30 per hour for drivers, and an equipment billing value of $80 per hour. In fact, your fleet's history may show costs that are similar or higher. If your mechanic performs 3 unnecessary brake adjustments per week on your trucks or trailers, you are looking at hours of unnecessary labor. Using the costs of our example, this means an annual expense of $1,152 for unnecessary maintenance. Brake Inspector alerts your driver and maintenance staff to brake adjustments when they are needed. This means your fleet spends more time on the road and less time in the shop. Brake Inspector will preempt costly repairs by identifying existing and potential brake problems. Brake Inspector will alert you to maintenance issues that your highly trained staff will not normally uncover during routine maintenance inspections. The system will detect non-activating or frozen slack adjusters. A dangerous hung brake condition is immediately detected. Slow activating or deactivating brake chambers are identified and point the way to kinked lines, blocked or seized valves, and related causes. The result is preemptive maintenance opportunities before costly repair or replacement is required, costing many hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Quite often, a vehicle's brakes are at different levels of wear. A unique feature of Brake Inspector lets your maintenance staff adjust all brake chambers to the same adjustment point for all brake chambers. This ensures that equal braking force is being applied at each wheel. No single wheel end is bearing a greater braking load than other wheel ends. This balanced braking means more even tire wear, extended tire life, and lower replacement costs. From a productivity standpoint, Brake Inspector will reduce the time for your driver to complete his daily pre-trip inspection. For example, a full check of air brake operating status takes about 20 minutes for a 3-axle vehicle. This amounts to over an hour and a half every week. With Brake Inspector, the air brake inspection takes only the time required to apply a full brake application and check the display module. 1.5 hours weekly is now a matter of minutes. The equipment is no longer tied up for lengthy pre-trip brake inspections. Even fleets that can perform the inspection in less time will enjoy the productivity improvements from using Brake Inspector. Using the savings calculator, we can see that quicker pre-trip inspections can result in thousands of dollars saved each year. Driver downtime can be reduced over $2,000 each year, and your equipment will be on the road faster with up to $6,000 of increased productivity. Considering the savings from unnecessary brake adjustments and less time doing pre-trip brake inspections, the Brake Inspector system will pay for itself in less than 12 months. And that's before any added costs from roadside detainment and out-of-adjustment fines. Brake Inspector means a safer fleet with added cost savings. Equipping your fleet with Brake Inspector means fewer roadside detentions for out-of-service violations. The cost of dispatching a mobile mechanic or your maintenance staff can be extremely expensive, and that's before you address equipment downtime and late deliveries. Fewer expensive roadside fines for brake infractions means less expense to your operation. Fewer operating demerits mean less penalties for your fleet. And the value of improving your reputation for commitment to road safety to the regulatory agencies, to your employees, and the public in general? Priceless. To recap, Brake Inspector is an air brake diagnostic system that identifies brake chambers operating within DOT brake stroke adjustment limits, identifies out-of-adjustment brake stroke conditions for all vehicle brakes, alerts operating and maintenance staff to faults in the foundation brake system, including non-activating brakes and brakes that have failed to release. Brake Inspector will provide your fleet with real maintenance and productivity savings by reducing maintenance costs from unnecessary brake adjustments, by revealing brake problems and faults before they become expensive repairs, by extending tire wear through balanced braking. Brake Inspector shortens the driver pre-trip brake inspection time. It also reduces mechanic time spent diagnosing out-of-adjustment brakes. Your equipment is more productive, spending less time in the shop and more time on the road. Brake Inspector means a safer fleet with fewer roadside detentions for out-of-service violations, fewer expensive DOT fines, and lessens your operating demerits. Improved confidence for staff, customers, and the driving public. Call Spectra Products today for more information on Brake Inspector and other products that reduce maintenance costs and enhance equipment safety. Or we will put you in touch with a Spectra dealer in your area. Spectra Products Incorporated, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Toll free 888-381-2355. In the Greater Toronto Area, 416-252-2355. Our email address is info@spectra-ssa.com or visit our website www.spectra-ssa.com.